Sometimes you know a voice before you know the person, and what a voice it is. Today I'm welcoming the voice of South African rugby, a better, more hopeful, a more loyal Cape Townian than me. Three-time TV Sports Comms Guy of the Year for a country with SuperSport. Also written 3 books, probably a 3 handicap guy as well. It looks like it's on the PGA. He's toured with the box for many years, so it's fitting that he pods by the name What Goes on Tour. My friend, Matt Pearce. How's it, Matt?
Hey, Harry, good to see you. First time since Marseille, if I'm not mistaken. I can't believe I missed you in Durban. Don't know how we did that.
Yeah, I don't know, but we'll rectify that very soon. How much truth is there to the Perth Fontaine, the Fontaine part? How much Fontaine is there in Perth nowadays?
Goddess Fire Fontaine. Okay, so within about 50 meters of the Springboks Hotel, there is a shop selling all things South African, but most importantly, the protein that we've all come to love that you cannot bring in to Australia for fear of being arrested at the border. So you have to buy your biltong fresh and your Droevorst. And I went and stocked up today for the game, actually. And there's 3 Springbok shirts hanging on the wall of the shop, all signed. The guys have all been in there stocking up and looking forward to it. Yeah, apparently, I just heard today, unverified information that the Optus is sold out.
Is it? That's beautiful. You know, you looked at Brisbane last week, and no matter how the constituencies were, the thing was packed. It was energy. That is the future, maybe, of Australian rugby when the Boks are in town. Is fill it up with all the expats.
Yeah, the one stand at the end of the ground to our right as we were looking, it was jam-packed with green jerseys. I'd never seen anything like it. And Suncorp's always been great from an atmosphere point of view. I've always loved it. You're nice and close to the action. It's a good stadium. It's what the players describe as a fast field, but you're nice and close to the action. But to have that many South African fans in the stadium was unusual. You know, everybody was talking about the curse of Suncorp. Well, they laid it to rest for at least a while with that performance, but also with some incredible support behind them. I mean, when the team did their lap after the game, that one stand remained packed until a good 15 minutes after the game, and the team gave them what they wanted to see, which was great. But yeah, fantastic atmosphere, really, really good.
Yeah, it's been building, and I mean, for a country like Australia that's really struggling right now with their rugby support-wise and sort of the future, looking at it, it's a cautionary tale and it's an encouraging tale of how quickly your fortunes can change. You're on Chasing the Sun, one, where you're talking about the sort of the gloomy days, and you're on Chasing the Sun 2, and you're talking about how quickly it can turn around if people have heroes, if they are excited about the team sheets, and we'll get into team sheets here in a second. But how much hope do you have for the Wallabies if they can just stick to this? They got a good coach in hand. They obviously have plenty of talent. Could they turn this thing around by the time 2027 comes around in Australia?
I think they can, Harry. The player base might not be as deep as South Africa, but if there's one person who can do it, I mean, let's look at the track record of Joe Schmidt. Rassie Erasmus talks about Joe Schmidt often, because when Rassie and Jacques Nienaber were coaching there in Munster, Joe was coaching Ireland. And it was during his tenure that a country with 180 professional rugby players, 45 players at 4 provinces, became number 1 in the world. And as well as Andy Farrell has done to continue that and to win a Grand Slam, etc., it was Joe Schmidt who took them to number 1. And he has this record of being able to develop a plan around his raw materials. And I think when he gets used to the raw materials that he's got in Australia, and it remains to be seen, I've seen a lot of debate while I've been here in the last 10 days or so, Harry, around do they reinstate the Ghetto law or whatever it is that allows overseas-based players to come back. I mean, you've seen the tangible positive effect that has had on South African rugby, and that hasn't weakened South Africa's domestic teams at all. If anything, it's creating a greater window for the younger players to demonstrate their talents in the URC via the 4 franchises with the Cheetahs as well, and down now into the Currie Cup, which started a few weeks ago. So there are still pathways which are not blocked by players plying their trade abroad. And if you can find a solution that allows you to draw on that experience, because don't forget, it's not just test experience that you're bringing in with your overseas-based players. It's intellectual property from multiple other countries. You've got players playing in Japan. You've got players playing in the English Premiership. You've got top 14. You've got players playing in Ireland. So you're drawing on multiple different coaching philosophies, and the players are empowered to bring that knowledge back into the environment. And I see very few, if any, negatives in that.
Yeah, what was the old knock on us that we couldn't tour? We were not good at traveling. That's not a knock anymore. When you have 5 or 6 guys from Japan eating, living, learning different cuisines and cultures. You have in the IRC, as we call it, you're playing so many varieties that you're not really surprised. And it was kind of illustrative when you saw New Zealand welcoming Argentina and Australia welcoming South Africa, and these are for the 2 or 3 years now have not really seen each other. And it seemed like the Boks could adapt even more easily than vice versa. That could be the way going forward. Now, I think you're right. Joe's a patient man. He'll build an academy. He'll try to build pathways, and he'll try to have his players understand what he wants. That looks like what Rassie has built now. Take us through. But you're an embedded man, so you see some things behind the scenes. What do you see Rassie and his team of coaches building in way of being able to slot in? A 1 or 2 cap prop. What are they doing on set piece? What have you seen at training this week that shows you that there's a machine here? It's not just about stars and then, third stringers.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the props, because let's look at this tight 5. If we drill into selection for this weekend, you've just had an equal record victory, 26 points over the Wallabies at Suncorp. So the following week, you make 10 changes in personnel and a positional switch in the starting 15 alone. Now, this tight 5 that is starting in Perth has a total of 30 test caps across the 5 players. Mm-hmm. But what an opportunity for them. And if you want to ask about preparation, what goes on at training, well, the best person to talk to, and I got to talk to him one-on-one this week in an interview for SuperSport, Jan-Hendrik Wessels, like a schoolboy prodigy. He played lock at school, and there's plenty of video footage of Jan-Hendrik streaking away from opposition backlines wearing number 5 on his back. And
they asked Dwayne, are you a prop or a hooker playing prop? And he said, Dwayne said he's a lock. He's a lock, hooker and prop. Yeah.
No, but then he said he's definitely not going back to lock. He doesn't have the height. But he's gone between prop and hooker at franchise level. An incredibly valuable skill set to have. You would think that at test level, ultimately he's going to specialize in one of those, although being able to be a fullback if necessary is a useful tool. But you would expect, given the technicalities of scrumming at this level, that he would settle on one. But in preparation for this test match, I mean, he's been in the Springbok environment for the most of the last 6 weeks. And as Don Heeman said, this guy has now scrummed over the last month and a half at training, live scrums only, no scrum machines. He's scrummed against Frans Malherbe, Vincent Koch, Thomas du Toit, Trevor Nyakane. What better preparation? And this is a common theme in this group, Harry. They'll tell you in a press conference, they'll tell you in a one-on-one interview for the world to hear that they don't believe that anything that they face on a Saturday is any more challenging than what they face in a live scrum or a live maul session on a Wednesday. Yeah, so what you have is 2 or possibly even 3 world-class packs of forward. And I said to Rassie this week, when is it right or wrong to give a new crop of players a chance. The fact is that this tight five has spent most of the last 6 weeks operating as a unit against arguably the best tight five in the world. So if they're not prepared now, and I'm not deflecting from the pressures of Test match rugby, obviously, but off the back of a morale-boosting win in Brisbane, is there a better opportunity? That's my counter argument to everybody saying, oh, no, we shouldn't have made so many changes. And it's certainly not, by the way, disrespect to the Wallabies. This is the Springboks saying we have to build experience amongst our squad. By the way, we're going home next week, and then 2 weeks after that, we play back-to-back tests against the All Blacks, then travel to Argentina. So maybe this was the best week to create opportunity. Oh, and by the way, just in case there's a little swerve anywhere, I give you in jerseys 16 to 23, 8 World Cup winners, including Malcolm Marx, Oxen Chair, Vincent Koch, Eben Etzebeth, and Kwagga Smith. So
come on. Yeah, is this the best bench you've ever seen on a team sheet? I'm having a hard time seeing a better bench. Yeah.
It's extraordinary bench. And so you can see the depth of planning in this selection.
So it becomes it's scant time. Actually, it's interesting with Test rugby. You don't have the players with you as much as people realize, and then you don't have as many tests that you can plug in to see a Wessels. You can see a Ruan Nortje. Like, is he hitting rucks at this level the same as he did with the Bulls? Because you have Scotland and Wales at end of year tour. You have Argentina in a very uncomfortable place. You're going to go to Tucumán and drive forever into the dust, and literally go into a war. You don't want to put someone in their first match or second match there.
And a vastly improving England as well on that end of year tour. So Scotland, England, Wales.
So it looks like there's plenty of provision for that, Matt, and there's like a plan here at place. And it's not just a plan for today. It's a plan for these next 2 seasons, because you want to put some caps into some guys so they're at 20, like a Marco van Staden, 21 caps. He's battle-hardened, you know what he looks like, you can plug him in. Do you see some of these guys
for the 4th time, Harry? That's the thing. Yeah. He's only starting for the 4th time in Perth. So, 20 plus caps, but a 4th start.
He's almost like the fix-it guy, because he can play all those 3 positions, a bit like Flo back in the last cycle, and that what that is. When you look at this current crop, Jan-Erik Wessels, Johan Grabelaar, Salman Murat, Ruan, and then Elrich Low. All those, do you think that Rassi already knows that there's 2 or 3 that are going to go all the way to the World Cup, or is he still deciding that? Or do you think all 5 of those guys have a shot?
I think everybody who's currently in the squad has a shot. But then when you look at an Elrich Low and how well he performed, first start in the number 8 last weekend, he obviously got a start at 7 against Portugal. And then you consider that Evan Ruiz has obviously gone for this shoulder surgery. He's had a couple of test starts. Jasper Visser, after this tour, will be back from suspension. Everybody was talking during the URC about Cameron Hanekom, who plays number 8 for the Bulls, where Elrich Low plays 7. You're starting to have some very pleasant problems again.
Yeah, exactly.
The competition for places in this team is just extraordinary. I mean, if you start thinking about, and this is not to be blasé in any way, shape, or form, but just think about the players that are not on this tour.
Simply.
And Ergie Snyman is on the tour, but obviously injured a foot in training in Brisbane, so he hasn't played. So RG Snyman, Franco Mostert, Loet de Jager, Steven Kitshoff, Jasper Visser, Damian Willemse, Faf de Klerk, none of them are here.
Yeah. I've actually remarked on this that, there's 990 caps start against Ireland in Durban, and then now we're 330. So it's basically a third. And it looks like Rassi is saying, I know I have my first 1,000 caps, and I know I have my second team 1,000 caps. Can I find my third team? Because right now that would be a pretty low number. And he hasn't been shy in throwing guys into the deep end. Typically, though, he's put like a Sasha surrounded by caps, or he's put an Elrich Low surrounded by caps. This This time, actually, he's saying, here's a sort of a Bulls pack, kind of Bulls pack. I'm throwing there like a Peter Steph toy to sort of bail you out as the hard worker. And it looks like to me that means that the breakdown will be pretty much the same as it was. It's the set piece where the Boks had dominance at scrum and then at line out. That's interesting here because you have two very young locks. You have Salman being captain and line out caller. And that was one of the big edges against the Wallabies. So looking at this now second test, and the Wallabies obviously putting more experience in their set piece. How do you see both set pieces going in the line out and maybe in the rain?
Well, first of all, I think Ruan will manage the lineouts. It was interesting last week when RG damaged his foot at training on Tuesday. Rassie actually spoke about it and said, look, we're going to give him time to be better for Brisbane. And if he doesn't come through, Ruan will actually go into the team, straight into the starting lineup at 5. And he then picked up an injury late in the training session on Wednesday. Not anything too serious, but he couldn't play at 100% come Friday. And so that's what facilitated necessitated the move of Peter Steph to 5 and Ben Jason starting at 7, and then Salman came onto the bench. So it's a massive challenge for Ruan, but one that he will relish. It's a first opportunity for him to start a test match. Salman gets through a huge amount of work. He's a grafter, he rucks, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that combination goes. But it is an untested combination. I think in the front row, Thomas du Toit has been itching for a start. He, by all accounts, I watched a lot of Premiership rugby this past season, and from what I saw and from a lot of the accounts that I got from people on the ground there, he was destructive for Bath in the Premiership. And
he was a try scorer, and he was probably, everyone had him in the discussion for Premiership team of the season.
Yeah. So, and he's been waiting for this opportunity. And I think with the quality that this squad has produced, the incentive to perform week in and week out is very much there. And they talk about backing up performances, being better. I said to my commentary partner, Shimmy, this morning, we were just chatting, and he's not that taken with historical records. And I think he's got a point, actually. We sort of start going back to when South Africa came back into international rugby. But the fact is that since readmission, the Boks haven't won 3 in a row in Australia ever. They can do that on Saturday. If you take Sydney 2022 last week in Brisbane, they've got the opportunity to do that for the very first time. So
it's a fantastic rivalry, but it's sort of one of the mildest rivalries around. If you saw if the mathematics of it actually is strong, it's 51-40, many tests, only 3 drawn. They gave us a little bit of a favor here this week because as we move to the backs now, and by the way, as a tourist and honorary sort of Bach embedded guy, are the forwards adopting you, or do you hang around with the backs?
No, well, I try not to. I try not to discriminate. They're all very friendly. They're an amazingly welcoming team, an engaging team. They're great. But just back to your point on the tight 5 for a second, and how will they go? Angus Bell is a massive comeback for the Wallabies. He's highly rated. And I think from the first scrum in Brisbane, the Wallabies were under pressure. Angus Bell is the guy to provide some of that stability. And, we were impressed with Nick Frost last weekend. Very unfortunate for him to be ruled out. And also, was it Jeremy Williams who took a knock to the head as well? So he's unavailable. So they've had to reshuffle a bit in that tight 5 as well. Angus Blythe coming in at number 4, Lucan Salakaia-Loto at 5. He'll need to take a bit of a step up, I think, in his ball carries. He's an imposing figure, but we're used to seeing him more in the past as a back row forward, as a sort of strong carrying blindside. So they look a little bit thin in the second row, and let's see how they go at scrum time as a consequence of that. I mean, this Springbok Type 5 scrumming unit, as I said, they had a full-on live scrum session yesterday, Wednesday, late morning here in Perth, and they were taking on, a World Cup winning Type 5. So there is no better way to prepare.
Yeah, and I think that Dwayne just likes being back in camp as a coach because he likes to scrum. He's I watched him at Durban, and he was full on in the second team scrumming against the first team. So I think you saw him this week up against the new Tide 5. He looks like he's enjoying his rugby, isn't he?
No, Dwayne's had to tape his ears this week. They've been bleeding. He can't help himself.
He's full on.
If in an emergency you wanted to tell him he's going off the bench on Saturday, he wouldn't think twice.
He looks ready. He looks ready, man. Hey, before we jump into the team roster of the Wallabies, which just landed, I'm fascinated by pronunciation. You've got to be. If there was Olympics and there was an event for pronunciation, you'd be a medalist, man, because you have to go from Sasha Feinberg, Ngoma Zulu to Afela Lefase, and then you're going over to Lukan Salakaya Lotto, Marika Korobeti. I never see you miss a beat. Do you actually do calisthenics with the tongue? Are you doing do you go to like speech classes? How do you mesh all these wonderful names? Forget about Montoya and Chocobaris.
Yeah, no, you stand in front of the mirror and repeat. And
what is the hardest in terms of diversity or origin? What kind of names? What alphabet makes you struggle the most?
I would say, having done some World Rugby Under-20 Championship recently, Georgia versus Fiji.
Oh, that's the long names too.
that's pretty tough. Georgia, Fiji, but you know what? I see it as a respect thing, and I don't want to take any moral high ground here, because do I make mistakes? Of course. In the heat of the moment, you might get a syllable wrong, and it's never on purpose. But I think someone's name is just an integral part of who they are. I get mostly positive comments. I got one weird comment a couple of weeks back from somebody who then deleted their post, asking if I was trying to sound clever when I said Rechejo Faditswe Nche on air, and am I trying to be smart? Well, no, it's his name. I mean, yeah. I know it's much easier to call him a 2-letter, 1-syllable ox, but a couple of times during a game, I like to call him by his name, which is Rechejo Faditswe, and which means we are blessed. It's a beautiful thing. He's proud of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a respect thing, and I try as hard as I can, but I'm not saying I always get it right in the heat of the moment.
That's probably the thing, is coming from South African base, is you have 6 or 7 different dialects and every kind of background, so you're already ready for the challenge. Yeah. Well, let's jump in. So we know, obviously, the Bok team has been named for a while, and it's been the subject of much debate. It's 331 caps to start with, and then this monster bench that comes in. And we won't cover that all over again, except that Fase probably is Fase is probably the one that we're looking at now from the back line and saying, we have your experienced guys, but that's the one you're looking at, the weekend special 5-cap guy. Let's look at what the Wallabies have up against him, and we'll kind of work our way backward that way. So we have actually a pretty settled backline. Tom Wright gets renamed with his friend Andrew Kellaway. Those are 30-cap kind of guys. You have Ikitau and Hunter Paisami, no difference, same midfield. And then you have the addition of Marika Korobeti. Talk about that. Why is Korobeti back in? What do we expect to see from him? And will we see something in the Mapimpi versus Korobeti rematch?
Yeah. Well, obviously, Filippo Dangunu, he actually had a fractured bone in his leg. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But he was not available for selection. Joe Schmidt said last week that he was very close to picking Korombete last week anyway, but he was relatively new into the Joe Schmidt environment. And that's why he held him back for another week. I think regardless of injury enforced unavailability, I think Korombete was always going to play this week. There's some spice there, isn't there? If we think back to 2022 in Adelaide, when Korombete got lauded for the tackle of the year by Australian fans, and the South African fans thought it should have been a yellow card and a penalty try. So, and we can agree to disagree. And then there was a bit of a backlash in Sydney when Mapimpi scored, and there was a scuffle, and he sort of held his hand down on Kwarombete's face in the dirt after he'd scored the try, and then Mapimps got a yellow card, and there was some pretty fierce instruction around keeping quiet through the referee. So, yeah, I think, look, it adds a nice little subplot. You know, the last time they met, that's what happened. So there's always a little bit in it. And let's not forget what happened with Nick White in Adelaide, and he's back.
Yeah, I just call him. I call him the mustache. He's not even a real person. He's just, his mustache precedes him. He's like Daniel Day-Lewis, and There Will Be Blood. So was Makazole telling was he telling Korombete to shut up, or was he telling Nick White to shut up? Because that's a losing cause. I mean, no one's ever going to tell Nick White to shut up.
I think all of the above. It's a pretty vigorous instruction. I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I've heard a lot of people here say they really like the Tate McDermott Tom Liner combination. And I see Tom Liner is not playing, but Ben Donaldson is.
Yes.
What you guys make of that?
So it's interesting from the Australian perspective. There's the biggest debate always rages around this, which is 9 and 10. It's sort of the positions where they fixate. Even though the first test was not lost because of that, and you have a sort of settled back line that makes sense, and it was at the forward pack, at the coal face where the test was lost. You have a change here. You have Jake Gordon with his bad box kicking and poor exits out. Nick White, who's known as a kicking nine. He has a different sound. You know, like some different nines have different sounds with kicks. Nick White's got that booming, thwacking sound. He can put that hang time up there. But they pair him back with Noah Lolosio. And Noah Lolosio caught a lot of grief. And then you look at the bench and say, Ben Donaldson, because he's had some real struggles this year and last year. So it's interesting. Tate probably was the nine that looked better on the pitch. He had a little more pace around it. He doesn't have a great pass, but he's really quick to the ruck. So it looks like Joe Schmidt is saying we're going to do our box kicks. We're going to be better at that. We've got to chase better. Korombete is a better chaser. And then on the bench, we have people who can play a little bit more ball. Ben Donaldson is going to probably take on the line a little bit more. Noah Lolosio is more of a structured Brumbies 10. So that makes a lot of sense, does it to you, that's what you would do following on and trying to make the game tighter and slower, actually?
No, well, it does, but also with an eye on the weather, Harry, because all the forecasts now, I mean, I live in Cape Town. It's pretty similar climate to Perth. And one thing you can't do in either city is trust a weather forecast 48 hours in advance. But all the weather forecasts so far suggest that Saturday is going to be very wet. So, you know, the Nick White, excellent hang time on the box kicks, Korombete steaming down, that it makes sense. And trying to force mistakes out of the Springboks under the high ball. It also, one of the selections we haven't spoken about, so sorry to go back to the box, but Morne van den Berg, starting a test match for the first time, just got the one cap off the bench against Portugal. He's a brilliant running scrum half. He asks a lot of questions around the fringes of the ruck, but his kicking game, if the weather is wet, is going to be tested as well. And he's up against a seriously experienced, niggly campaigner, which makes it a massive test match for him.
Yeah, the script's been flipped around, right? So the Boks were supposedly the one that were bigger, slower, tie them out. It's actually the opposite. The Boks have a lot more quickness edge, especially with the Grant Williams off the bench. That's going to be stretching the rucks. I think it's the Wallabies who prefer a slower grind. Now, interesting, you go to the breakdown. So coaches who lose a big match, the biggest loss on Australian soil to the Box, or drawn with another loss, you have a choice. Do I give you the revenge factor? I'll keep faith with you, so I can throw you out there, Rob Ballatini, Harry Wilson, and Carlo Tizzano, or I can try to sub in. So in the back line, there were some changes. But in the loose trio, where I thought the Wallabies were really mullered, he runs out 43 cap Rob Ballatini and Harry Wilson 14 caps. It's Carlo Tizzano, who actually is a local boy who gets that chance of redemption. I kind of like that. I mean, I think if you're going to have a guy in there and you cap him and then he kind of gets messed up, he kind of gets overmatched, give him another. Just see what it looks like on your home turf. What do you think Carlo Tizzano can bring this time around?
Well, look, I actually think his tackle numbers were really good. He got over the ball effectively a couple of times, but also he gave away a couple of penalties. And Luke Pearce was pretty strict with that kind of sealing off on attacking ruck, actually, which is quite unusual at this level. But it's obviously something that the referees have been told to have a close look at. And he got pinged at times for being a arriving player at an attacking ruck, going off his feet, not necessarily having a material effect, but not allowing a Jackler to get over the ball and conceding the penalty. Other than that, he was pretty assured. I mean, that was the proverbial baptism of fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Forward. And now I see that it's kind of a jersey swap with Wilson and Ballatini. We always thought Ballatini would be more effective at 8. Be interesting to see if there's any real tangible change in roles and responsibilities. But you want Ballatini running at your opposition defense line from a little bit more depth. I mean, he's very dynamic on the ball carry. Maybe didn't get the sort of head start he needed playing on the blind side last week. So be interesting to see how they just change those roles between Wilson and Ballatini. I've also heard from some of my mates over here that Wilson's a very different player when Fraser McWright is available. But again, Joe Schmidt says, it's impossible to pick an exact replica of McWright, but that Tizzano would be the closest in the squad to a Fraser McWright. So interesting to see how the balance of that back row changes. But yeah, I agree with you. It would have been almost placing blame on a debutant if you left him out a week later after the loss in Brisbane. He certainly wasn't to blame.
No, he wasn't, and so he's looking for hard carries as well, and he gets them from Wilson and Ballatini. Harry Wilson, that reminds you a little bit of a CJ Stander, who Joe Schmidt kept faith with in Ireland, and never calls for him to be dropped from Irish people for a long, long time. But what he said is, there's not that many guys who can carry 12 times in a game. I mean, you think it's easy. It's very hard to have those G-forces applied through your bodies, get up and go again and go again. And Harry Wilson's one of those guys. He doesn't have a lot of power, though, sometimes in those contact areas. So now you're looking at some of the changes from Test 1, which is Angus Bell, Josh Nasser, Alan Alatoa, LSL, and Angus Blythe. That's your tight 5. So it's a big tight 5. Angus Blythe is a red who plays aggro. He's kind of a mongrel type. And then you have the other names are probably well known except for Josh Nasser, who's only a 3 capper. Angus Bell's probably going to have to carry the ball. I mean, he's had some problem with his feet, but he's a very good carrier. He's a bit like Tank Tutoy in that sense. Are you looking for this tight 5 battle to be, the spiciest one on the pitch? Is that where we're going to watch and see how this test goes early? Will we see how Bell does on his return?
I think so, Harry, and why not? That there was the tone was set early in the game in Brisbane. If you think about it, I'm sitting in commentary with Shimmy, right? And the first scrum is called, and there's Cheslin Colby with the ball in hand to put the ball in. And you go, where on earth is Kobus Reinach? Oh, there he is, standing next to his 10 with his left wing putting the ball in, and all sorts of things going on with Billy LaRue behind them. And you're going, what are they cooking here? Right. But then they actually cooked nothing because they got a scrum penalty. And that set the tone for what was a hugely dominant scrum performance. So there has to be an element in that Wallaby tight five of righting the wrongs there, and it becomes a pride thing as much
Yeah,
as any.
the only reason why you do trickery, both that thing you referred to and also the throw to Ben Jason Dixon and the toss back to Ibn Etzebeth, you only do that if you have complete confidence in your set piece. So, there's been talk about disrespect, respect. I think, as a player, you realize if someone's doing that, they're almost clowning you, you've got to get the respect back. It's your job to get the respect back. So I would think we're going to have a fired up tight five. You would think that you're going to get some, revenge factor here. On the bench, we have Billy Pollard. So there'll be 2 Pollards playing in this match, 3 capper, and then you have the 137 caps of James Slipper, who never seems to slow down, and Zane Nongor, who got a bit of a workover. On the one big change would be on the bench for the Wallabies is Tom Hooper and Saru Uru. So Uru is well known to people in Super Rugby as a hard-charging, tough guy. It's almost like their version of 2 locks on the bench because Tom Hooper is sort of a tall flank. What does that send? There's not an open fetcher on the bench. It's just Hooper and Uru to come in if they pull off Wilson or Valentini or Tizano.
Yeah, but the thing is that Hooper has to cover second row, and that just shows you, with the 2 guys out with HIAs and not making a plan to pick a skeleton. That's why I said earlier, it's looking a little bit thin in that second row. Hooper's I suppose they can both cover second row, but you don't have the luxury of then, unless you go 6-2, which they obviously don't want to do. Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I think Tizano's got to go. He's got to go 80.
I think so. The other thing that's big on the bench, besides Ben and Tate that we talked about, is Max Jorgensen, who's a highly rated son of a really well-regarded leagues player for Australia, I believe. Max Jorgensen is a teenager, so he's like the Sasha of Australia in the sense that he's this highly heralded recruit, but he's a rookie and he's going to run out there with either the game's in the balance or he's supposed to try to make it back. So quite a bit of pressure on the youngster. What do you make of Joe? There's a bit of talk about Rossi experimenting. Joe's also saying, hey, I want to take a look at some of my young fellas.
Yeah, but Joe Schmidt was unapologetic about that last week, Harry. When I spoke to him, I had a great chat with him one-on-one in Brisbane. And he said, we have to be really honest with ourselves here and say, we are at a stage now that Rassie was at 6 years ago, literally. And we're going to start doing things. And I think that's not necessarily 100% true because Rassie did have the core of a squad. If you look at what he did in 2018 and 2019, there were not a huge number of players that he added from what had been playing before, but there were some tweaks and some new systems that they brought in and a new defensive system, etc. But I think Joe Schmidt is right to be saying this to the Australian public. He said, I'm at the start of a process here. Yes, we won 3 tests on the bounce. To start my tenure, we are under no illusion at the enormity of the rising challenge that we face in these 2 test matches and what they will continue to face. They're on a plane to Argentina for a couple of tests there, and we know how tough that can be. But he also made the point that you can get sucked into looking too closely at your opposition.
Yeah,
and if you do that, you can divert attention from what's the most important thing is that what are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? We're playing against the number 1 ranked side in the world. So if we can achieve X, Y, and Z with this very young, very inexperienced team, James Slipper excluded, and if we can set ourselves some targets that we can measure ourselves against, given the quality of the opposition, then we will grow. But if we get fixated with just, oh my goodness, this world-class double World Cup winning and get overawed by the opponent, it's not really going to help anybody. So, yes, Max Jorgensen gets a chance off the bench, but isn't it interesting that what he's going to face most likely is not a fledgling international fly half in Sasha Feinberg Ngomezulu. When he comes on, he might be facing up to a double World Cup winning fly half in Andre Pollard, or Pollard at 12 with Marnie Libok at 10.
Yeah. And there might be 3 fly-offs on the field. There might be Sasha, Marnie, and Andre on the field.
So it's tough. Yeah. And I think to go back to a point we made right at the start of this discussion, I want to shut down this notion that this is possibly disrespectful to the Wallabies. I don't see that at all. I see here there are 33 players on this trip in green and gold who were narrowed down from a squad of around 45. Some injuries involved in that, but every single one of those 33 is thirsting for the opportunity to play on a Saturday, to win test matches for South Africa. And the ones that are playing in Perth know that their opportunities may be few and far between. So my goodness, they better make it count.
I see. Yeah, it's almost like creating a pressurized situation in your favor. Like this is almost a test within a test.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's interesting when you look at from the Wallaby side, and I love what Joe said. Clever guy. He was like, we're not really competing right now at this point in time with the world champions. We're competing with ourselves. And so he wants to see his week-on-week improvement, which is incremental. Like, of course, he wants to win, and he's going to say all those things. But I think that's brilliant to not put your team in that kind of pressure vice. The other thing is, obviously you saw the team announced from South Africa, and I thought, oh, no, like maybe there's some Bloemfontein, trauma here. But then I saw the bench, and I said, no. Okay, at any point in time, and maybe early, it could even be a 40-40 game where people just run on en masse. Definitely Rossi wants to notch this win. So we'll just close out here in a second and say this. My big question is, different kind of game, whether the fact that you're playing the second time around, do you think it's a lower scoring game this time around, or you still see that sort of explosion that we saw in Brisbane?
Really tough one, because I do think it's weather dependent. The weather will dictate pattern. We've all seen the fingerprints of Tony Brown on the Springboks in the international season so far. We know that he's loving the raw materials that he's getting to work with in a Sasha, in a Morne van den Berg. We haven't even mentioned the fact that Lukhanyo is playing 12 with Jesse Creel alongside him, and then Mapimpi and Colby and Fassi as the back three. That is enormously exciting. It's full of.
I love how Rusty solved, or maybe Tony solved, the Creel versus Arm debate and said, "Let's have them both play together. Let's see what happens." It could be beautiful.
And another one who's back in South Africa who we didn't mention was Andre Esterhuizen. He was unavailable due to suspension. So you've got Lendi and Esterhuizen also not part of this group. So obviously they will want to demonstrate to Tony and Rassi and to the rest of the group that they can buy into this I won't call it a new style, but that some of the tweaks and the changes or the optionality that they've built into the game. And they might not get that opportunity against New Zealand at home, so they need to make it count. But conditions will dictate, how early in the game they are able to do that. If it's wet, I think the tight fives look to tussle and try and establish some kind of platform. I think, as you suggested early on from the Wallabies, Nick White will put the ball in the air a lot and get some kick chasers down there and try and put pressure on Fassi at the back. He's excellent under the high ball, excellent. And he's got two hugely experienced wingers supporting him there at the back, but it's a big test for him as well. Third start for him at fullback this year, where he started his first 3 tests on the wing. So his preferred position is obviously fullback. He gets to influence the game a lot more. And he spoke during the week about having the likes of a Willie Leroux in this environment, 96 caps, and the ability that Willie has to transfer knowledge to a youngster like Fassi. So yeah, look, I'm excited. It's going to be.
I think the problem for Australian fans looking at this, wet weather and bomb kicking is Fussy is a handful when he has any space at all. I think this is a spread attack. Tony Brown's system spreads the field, and you would think a guy like Lucanio Arm can find a way to set Fussy free. And if Fussy's free, it's good night. There's no one on the Australian team that could catch him. I don't even think that he could be caught in the air. So it's a matter of learning. Fussy hasn't seen enough at test level. He hasn't seen enough wrinkles, So Nick White's a canny operator, and he'll try to find those spots that Fussy doesn't want to be. Before we close out, tell us just a little tidbit. I know you probably play golf with the guys in the box, and we're always obsessed with golf and so forth. Who's a buck that you think is really good at golf, and he really is, and who's a guy that you wouldn't think that, and he actually is a pretty good golfer? Put you on the spot.
Wow, that is a tough one. Well, the simplest one, which you probably wouldn't think is a fabulous golfer, but is the best golfer in the group, is Franco Mostert.
No.
Frank.
What? Sos. Okay.
So Sos is about a 2 handicap golfer. Hits the ball an absolute country mile off the tee. Extraordinary, quite a big draw on him, but a serious golfer. Loves his golf. Every Thursday on a tour, he would be out there. There's usually 3 or 4 balls that go out on a Thursday on their day off. Sure, the one
kind of makes sense though, because he's calm. I can see him methodical and going into his process. Yeah. So yeah. I would assume, fly-offs are always known as being golfers, fullbacks.
Yeah, Andre, Villy, very accomplished golfers. Malcolm Marx thinks he's won.
Looks the part.
But isn't necessarily.
Yeah,
no, they love their golf. It's such a great form of relaxation for them on a tour. I know they were heading out for golf in Perth. 12 or 16 of them. I tell you who else is a very good golfer is Tony Brown.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Even as he has the Scottish golfer's hat, so he's ready. Hey Matt, seriously, it's been brilliant to have you on. Cannot thank you enough, and I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, everyone catch Matt's work, but also go and watch his pod, what goes on tour, because it's the kind of insights that we just talked about. The kind of stuff behind the scenes that makes a team really tick. And this is a happy team. Obviously, world champions tend to be, but I think it's chicken egg. I think they also became champions because of that. Anyway, thanks. Brilliant to have you on, but and anytime we'll have to have you back on as well. And I'm going to see you obviously in Cape Town and Jersey, and we're going to have to catch up.
Yeah, no, as you've said very often, you're a good tourist. So we'll have you on tour in Cape Town in a few weeks.
Cool, man. Cheers. Let's see. So.